And that's a huge distinction that I make, because there's a large gap in my mind between a Christian celebrity and a celebrity pastor. I think once you add the pastor title on there, it completely changes what the expectation should be there.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Things You Don't Hear in Church podcast. My name is Ethan.
And my name is Derry, and today I'm really excited for our guest. We're talking to John the Messenger. He's a TikToker. He's a Christian speaker. He's a really cool guy. I enjoy his content a lot. He does like this commentary on Christianity, but also it's very comedic at the same time. It's really, really tasteful. I enjoyed it a lot. I know Ethan enjoys it a lot. And today we're going to talk about celebrity pastors and maybe some other stuff if other stuff comes up. So how you doing, John?
Great. I really appreciate this opportunity. And even as you're introing me, it's still weird to get introed in that way, as far as being a TikToker and things like that. So I still am kind of getting used to that. But if it helps these types of opportunities and to be able to have these conversations with people, then it's really cool. So I appreciate you guys having me.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, how long have you had your TikTok? What was the origin story of that, real quick?
So I think I'm 35. I think it's similar for a lot of people around my age. It was quarantine. Whenever we were in and a lot of people that I'm connected with on there, that seems to be kind of the mutual story that similar to other things. Like, I had heard of TikTok and was like, this is clearly something for teenagers that dance, and that was pretty much it. And then I think people had sent me some videos, and I had taken the intro for it was really Instagram stories. That I had done some Instagram stories that people were following along with, and I thought, well, if I could do that on here, then that would be great. So I had that account for a little over a year and a half, and then I actually just restarted a new account coming up on a year. Maybe it was September. But I realized early on in that first account that I had gained followers for videos that weren't really Christian related. Not that they were explicit in any way, but I just kind of plateaued because any of the Christian stuff that I was putting out, people weren't really interested in. And so this second account is a lot more okay, I'm going to really be focused on just kind of the Christian content, and been able to build a really cool community on there. So so it's cool. I feel like I'm a weird defender of TikTok now to other people. I'm it's not as bad as everyone says it is. So it's fun. It's a cool outlet for me. It's a cool creative thing, but also I've been able to meet some really cool people, you guys included now. So that circle continues to grow, which is really fun.
Yeah. There's so much educational content on TikTok that I think is so valuable that you wouldn't get to otherwise.
Yeah. I think and I've a couple jokes about that where, guys will say I only ever see these scantily clad women and dancing, and it's dude, it's it's an algorithm, so it's so you're gonna, and that's what I've said. I laugh when because I'm not super active on Twitter at all. I have an account on there, but I see people talking about I'll never be on TikTok, and I'm someone active on Twitter, I don't know that you're really above you know what I mean,
you're definitely not.
And that's what I've said, you're gonna find what you're looking for, and so and similar to a lot of things, most of the time you see the worst of the worst, because that's what people will focus on and will get kind of outside of that circle. But like I said, I found a really cool community on there and made some really good friends through that. So it's been great.
Yeah. Speaking of TikTok, I was just watching one of your videos where you talked about the origin of your name. And so I had to do a little bit of a deep dive and try to find your music. And I found it on YouTube.
Good for you. That when you talk about a deep dive, that is it doesn't get much deeper than that. So that's really impressive.
10 videos of a live set that you guys had.
Was it
10 years ago or something like that?
Was it the one with did we do the Taylor Swift song? Was that one of them?
I listened to 3 of the 10 songs or 8 songs, and the one that I remembered was the Reliant K one.
Okay. Yeah.
I celebrate the day, or I think I did celebrate the day.
Yeah, that's cool. man, that's crazy.
Just
That is
a small thing I wanted to mention there at the beginning.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. Yeah, that was it was a funny thing because we were trying to just find a. So I was in a band called Stone the Messenger, just to bring other people up to speed, and I think it was really my idea. It was like, well, what if we, because at that point, I mean, it might have been like the end of the MySpace days. I'm not real sure, but
Wow.
I was like, well, what if we made all of our kind of handles on social media our name and then the messenger. And so I did that, and it just kind of stuck, and my last name is Richardson, so I have a really common name. And I just always kind of kept that because it was something that was going to set me apart. So good for you for finding that. That is that's really impressive.
It sounds
Should
like
we
a
link it in
poet
the
or something.
description?
John the Messenger.
I mean, you can. It's not something that I'm ashamed of at all. It was something that was really fun. Actually, someone mentioned in the comments like, oh, like you should post something on here. So I may even try to go get one of those videos and post a little snippet of it. But
nice.
But it was fun. Though, that was a great time.
Yeah, I can definitely relate. I was in a lot of those bands growing up too. Had a lot of fun doing it. Similar genres and everything. But yeah, let's get into talking about celebrity pastors.
Sure. Yeah, let's do it.
Ethan, kick it off.
Yeah, so you guys have probably heard the term celebrity pastor if you've been a Christian for 3 years or less even. They're pretty prevalent, i.e. the term celebrity pastor. If you watch the Hillsong documentary by Discovery Plus, that was like all about deconstructing Hillsong or something like that. Talked a lot about, I believe it was that Chad Veach maybe? Was that Chad Veach?
Carl Lentz. Chad
Veach is a guy from California, right? Carl Lentz, he was a celebrity pastor. There's other ones out there, Mike Todd, Stephen Furtick, Judah Smith, and some other not so, maybe you wouldn't consider them celebrity pastors, but they by definition are. Francis Chan, Matt Chandler, those guys. Some good, some bad. We're going to get into all of it today, discussing the pros, the cons, how should we think about this, and how much should we give weight to celebrity pastors. So John, what are some characteristics of celebrity pastors that we can kind of just get a working definition for?
Yeah, I think that, just when you break down the name into the two words, kind of defining those and then putting them together. So when you look at a celebrity, just someone that is well known within that specific community, in this case, maybe even outside of the community in some aspects. So someone that, that is maybe a household name in a majority of Christian households. And then, the pastor, I think it'll be interesting once we start kind of getting into this, because when you look at the name of a pastor or the title of a pastor, there are all kinds of things that come along with that biblically, that are supposed to fall into that. So I think defining them separately and then putting them together, and that's a huge distinction that I make, because there's a large gap in my mind between a Christian celebrity and a celebrity pastor. I think once you add the pastor title on there, it completely changes what the expectation should be there. So I think that would be the easiest thing, is like, how would you define a celebrity? And then, how specifically, how does the Bible define a pastor? But maybe even for you personally, how you would define a pastor. And that's really what we're talking about.
Yeah. I think of, in a lot of people's minds, there's two kind of big camps of, like, some people are super anti celebrity pastors, and usually in their mind, it's just like a select few they don't like them because they're teaching something they don't like, or they come from a different tradition than they are, right? And then there's camps that, like, that's all they've grown up with, right? And like their pastor is a celebrity pastor, and they love churches that are like mega churches, and it's just completely normal, right? And maybe there's some people in the middle, but do you think that it's always bad to have celebrity pastors, or it's good even, or is there like a middle ground? I want to like start kind of a conversation around that aspect of it. Like, is it beneficial? Is it not?
Yeah, I think it's really difficult. I would definitely I would probably, if there's a spectrum of how people feel about celebrity pastors, I would probably fall somewhere on the side of not being a huge fan. But it is interesting because when you say celebrity pastor, even for me personally, I can admit that there are probably 2 or 3 that come to mind, that I'm just, that just kind of rub me the wrong way. But then when when you talk about guys like Tim Keller or John MacArthur, or that they definitely also belong in that conversation. And so, yeah, I think that it's difficult to make a huge general statement of celebrity pastors are bad. But I also, and some of that comes down to personally how you define a pastor. One of the really tough things for me is calling someone a pastor who doesn't know their congregation. And so, for me, there are a lot of guys that much more fall into the preacher category, that are in a pastoral role. And I think that's something that we should take seriously. And so I don't think you can throw a blanket statement over it and say, celebrity pastors are bad. But I also think there's a lot of maybe temptation that comes along with being a celebrity pastor, and a lot of difficulty that comes along with that I don't know a lot of people can handle the right way. So it's definitely a nuanced thing. And I don't want to say they're all bad, but I would say that it's difficult for me to get on board with the idea, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah. It kind of goes from, sorry, Ethan, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
It affects the church really heavily. Like, I don't think we could ever get rid of people becoming celebrities. If you're a pastor, like if you're really good at teaching, like people in your community will probably come and listen to you. And from there it could spiral from a worship team becoming successful and then you being the preacher of that church. Like, there's just so many different ways that a church or a pastor can gain that kind of success. Even TikTok now, you have a lot of pastors becoming much more famous through just making educational videos, which is good too. There's a myriad of reasons people become famous. Televangelists, even, just kind of grandfathering that one in. There's a lot of those people left too that are still like very mega church pastors. But I think it does something really interesting to the church, and I want to talk about that a little bit, to where like you could become a celebrity pastor for completely benign reasons, like really, really good reasons. Like, you're great at exegesis and people really respect it, and people start going to your church, and then people start watching your sermons online, and you start having YouTube clips go viral or TikTok clips go viral or whatever it is if you're teaching, and all of a sudden your church just naturally goes from maybe a normal church to like there's thousands of people who want to come there now because like you just do a really good job at teaching the Bible, to where all the things you were doing really good, but now it's doing something to your church that maybe you would want, maybe you don't want. And I'd love to talk about that a little bit. Like, I think it goes from like, are celebrity pastors a good thing just generally? Are they teachers, are they pastors, to how does it affect their body that they're actually shepherding as that like evolves and can evolve quickly?
Yeah. It's a great question. I think, and it's something that I've wrestled with even in, like, I listened to the Rise and Fall of Mars Hill, that podcast, that was really interesting. And I look at guys, I look at guys like Stephen Furtick and Michael Todd and those guys. And I really wonder whether that's what they set out to do. And I think that kind of leads into what you're saying is, I have no idea if when they started those churches that it was like, we're going to grow this thing as big as humanly possible, and maybe it was and maybe it wasn't, but the outcome is the same no matter what. And so I think that's kind of what you're saying is like, so what do you do with that? And the effects, for me, it really depends on what your view of church is. Like, what is the church supposed to be and what is it supposed to do? And I think the basis that you have going into that, even their own personal relationship with God, plays into that a ton. You know, like when you are, and there's a reason the Bible talks so much about like the temptations that we face, even when it comes to money and things like that, because if you have people around you, and I think this was the thing with Mark Driscoll at Mars Hill, and my concern with a lot of celebrity pastors is they're told that everything that they're doing is great. No one ever disagrees with them, and so they're able to kind of insulate themselves, and then it's easier for it to become about the brand and about the numbers than it is what your church is actually doing. And I think that's the concern, and I think that's the effect on, and can be the effect on, the congregation, is you start to lose you start to lose what church is about, and what worship is about, what Sunday morning is about, and it becomes much, but again, some of that comes to just how, I know, and I got a lot of backlash about this at one point, but there was a clip from Stephen Furtick whenever he first started Elevation, and basically said, if this church exists for non-believers, and if you got saved here last week, then that was the last time that this church exists for you. Like this, it's not about you now. And so when you're going into it with that basis, then that's what you're going to grow, and so a lot of it comes down to just I think the person personally, but also being able to surround yourself with people that are going to help things grow in a healthy way, and being able to listen to that as well.
Yeah, that's really, it's really interesting what you said about the whole reason Elevation exists, because it kind of begs a question like, okay, if you're here for the unbeliever, and when I become a believer, it's not necessary I come here anymore, or you're not looking for my needs anymore. It's like, is that what church is for? What is
what yeah, and
well, yeah, just like, what is church for?
Yeah, he did go on to clarify, like and it wasn't saying that. Now, the reason that people were coming after me was because I used the audio to do like a mini video of like me leaving after he said that. Like, clearly this isn't for
like a comical thing.
Yeah, like, oh, okay, well then I don't belong here. And he went on to say, like, it's not like if you're a believer, don't come here, but it was more so like, you now are responsible for, I think he even said, you're a part of the team. I think he might have even used the term soldier. Like you're a part of, and so it's like your responsibility to bring people in now. And so not saying you don't belong here, but this church does not exist to meet your needs, basically. And so again, like when you go in with that mindset, then that's what's going to grow, like that's what you're doing. But I think, and you touched on this a little bit, Derry, but I think the thought of a celebrity pastor is just kind of it easily becomes a natural thing, because I think pastors become celebrities just in their own congregation.
Definitely.
A lot of times. Like I'm Presbyterian. And so when we talk, our pastors, the official title is a teaching elder. So we have a teaching elder and ruling elders, which are the elders in the body. And, according to our church government, one of those offices is not more powerful than another. It holds no more power than the other. But do people in the church view the pastor differently than they view the elders? Absolutely. Right. And so that mindset easily can seep into the local church too, which is why, again, I think it's so important to have leaders around them that are going to help things stay on the track that that they need to be on.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. What you're talking about a little bit ago about how it changes the like, as someone becomes a pastor, like, it can change what church is actually about. And it seems like that's what happens. Like, people will start to come for the person instead of coming for the purpose of church, which is like the communion of the body with Christ, right? Like, we're all coming together to commune together, to worship God and to be with him. And all of a sudden it's not about that anymore. It's about coming for a person, even if the person is really good at what they're doing, like really good at teaching.
Yeah.
Like you're now coming for a teaching, you're not coming for communion, right? Which is like why we're supposed to be gathering together.
Right.
It's really, really interesting how that focus can subtly shift, even if it's for really good reasons.
Yeah. And again, it is a difficult thing, but like we're not a big church at all. But one of the guys that I'm really good friends with that is also an elder talked about, he brought up at one point, like, what if we did start to grow exponentially? Like what if we did grow, is there a number that we would cap it to say, once we get to this number, we're going to start another church, because it's not practical in the way that we think about church to have that many people. And that goes back to the elders knowing the congregation, and the pastor knowing the congregation. So I wish that was more of a conversation with those bigger churches from the beginning, where the focus wasn't how many people can we pack in here, but how can we shepherd well. Like how can we build relationships with the people that are here, and not have it be something where people are even able to just show up Sunday morning and say that they're a member and then leave. But what comes along with being a member of a church, and so there are a lot of those little things that get lost whenever you're having 7 services on a Sunday and they're all packed.
Right. And it's really interesting, because as I was thinking about this, and like, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You can't be like, well, we've seen a few churches do really bad, so we're going to throw out all celebrity pastors, because you can't get rid of the fact that there are going to be influential like Christians throughout all of time that we like. Right now, I just started reading today a book by R.C. Sproul, or not R.C. Sproul, sorry, Spurgeon. And I have another book by R.C. Sproul, but like Spurgeon has been dead for a long time, and so he absolutely was what we would consider a celebrity pastor with the largest church in England of the day, and so when it comes to like, oh man, okay, we can't get rid of the fact that select people are going to be very well known and carry a lot of weight in the Christian community. I think then the question becomes, okay, if that's going to be something that we have 2 questions. Like, one, should Christians who want to influence the world or win souls, should we desire that spotlight? And I think there's 2 ways that goes. There can be a selfishness there that you shouldn't, if that's your heart, then you shouldn't be allowed to have power. The idea that if whoever wants power immediately should not be given power. That's like kind of a general idea I have sometimes, where I'm like, oh, you're weird now. We get out of here. And or 2, like maybe it's a godly zeal and God can use that, but then there needs to be a lot of character building around that. And the other thing is like, okay, so what qualities do we look for before giving those people that platform? Because one of the things that Mars Hill outlined and that you brought up earlier is that they think the reason Mars Hill collapsed in itself is because there wasn't a lot of deep soul character development that happened in Mark Driscoll before it blew up. So you weren't able to hold the weight of all that pressure, which, we see celebrities do this in Hollywood all the time. There's an immense pressure on them. They crack, they have a mental breakdown, they go to drugs, and they implode. And I always wonder, like, I don't think humans were created to be this known by this many people. It's like, we're not wired for it. We've seen it fail time and time again.
No, and yeah, that's great. And I think, again, I talked about there, in my mind, being a distinction between Christian celebrity and the celebrity pastor. But one thing that is a common thread in all, whether you're talking about musicians, just anyone in that realm, is that the more people you're known by, the more celebrity status that you gain, the further and further from a real community you tend to be. And so you become completely isolated. And so that plays into exactly what you're saying. Like, we're not made to be known by that many people, and we're not made to do this on our own. And so I think that's another thing, again, like I said, with celebrity pastors, I think that becomes really easy especially if your church is handing you more and more power, that you can kind of pick and choose who you're surrounded by. So it's no longer a community of all of these different people that are able to speak into your life. It's people that you want there that probably think similarly to you. And I've heard, you hear guys talk about on both sides of it. Like I'm a huge fan of like Andy Mineo, and he's talked about the difficulty of that just like celebrity and dealing with the anxiety and the people that are around you. And so he's kind of come back from that. But then you see guys on the other side of it, like the guys in Under Oath. I don't know if you guys are familiar with them at all, but
Yeah.
Of course, yeah.
It's the opposite, where they're like, you know what, if this is what this is going to be, then then I don't want it anymore. And so I think you're absolutely right. Again, for me, a lot of it comes down to just the foundation of where your life is, like what is your life founded on, and everything is built on top of that. And so it is. I understand the irony of sitting here and talking about we need to be really careful about how many people whatever. Meanwhile, I'm on TikTok every single day, like I hope I hope I gain more followers today. And so that's something that I've had to check myself with too, is like, why am I doing this? And there have been a few times where I've had to kind of hit the reset button, where I'm like, I'm only doing these things so that people will watch. There's no other reason to it. So I do think, even when we're talking about wanting to gain that and really being able to check that at the door, I think that's really important. And if it does come, then that it's one of those things that, like, having people want to hear you and want to listen to you is not inherently a bad thing, whenever that's your goal. And it's like, so even getting back to celebrity pastors, if your goal is, I'm going to go out and grow the biggest church that I possibly can, not because I'm trying to reach people with the gospel, but because I want the numbers. I think that's a huge distinction, and one that is very difficult. One that's really, I think, really difficult to make.
Yeah, there's a book called Spiritual Leadership, and I forget exactly who it's by, but one of a pretty famous, I want to say saint, because it's not like church history, but like pretty recent, in the last maybe 200 years, author. And he talked about, like, having zeal or having a passion is a good thing. You can have a type that is good. Ambition, he called it. He's like, if you have a spiritual ambition for the things of God, where your heart burns to see as many people get saved as possible, and you're ambitious to go out and evangelize and preach and study so you can preach, and read the Bible and pray and intercede so you can still, like, help people understand the scripture. That's a spiritual ambition that's really good. But then if there's, like, a fleshly ambition in there of, like, I'm doing this because I want power, it's like, or I want attention, it's like, oh, that's a little bit concerning. And I remember, like, I used to have so much of that. Like, I grew up in a more charismatic arena of Christianity. Of all the churches I went to, I didn't even know what Calvinism was until I went on a date with a girl and she brought up predestination, and I was appalled at, like, a 17-year-old. I was like, you would think God would intentionally send people to hell, or like predestine them for wrath? I was like, it was really awkward.
That your, sorry, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but was that the first date, or was that just like?
That was the first date. Now, we had been friends through high school, but we were like,
it was like in the car. It was in the car, right?
In the car, like, on the way home after the date.
Yeah.
It was.
I guess there's something
awkward
to be said for, like, let's see where this is going, kind of thing. But
I got brought up casually. Like, we were just talking about the Bible and what we were processing, and she's like, "Oh yeah, I was thinking about this," and, like, she said something about, like, like, God chooses who goes to heaven, who goes to hell, and I was like, "What did you say?" Like, and I grew up in the type of charismatic that said I could pray my hairline back, type stuff, like, name it and claim it. So that was, like, so far off my radar, I didn't know existed. But I forgot where I was going with that point. What was I saying right before that? I had a good point to make.
Sorry, I completely threw us off.
Help me out here.
I don't know. The hairline comment. I was just thinking
hairline comment got me.
You weren't
I'm gonna go back
exposed
and
to like a
post
lot of different
well,
teachers.
I was just yeah.
I got
I'll go
something to
back
talk
and
about
post
if
and
I can
figure
think
out. Maybe
about
I'll
it
edit
for a
this out.
second.
What's that? No,
I got
it's
something I
gone.
can
I
think
don't
about
even
if you
I
want
don't
to talk about.
remember what it was.
Well, you think about it, and I'll talk for a second.
Yeah, you keep talking.
I was thinking about like, is it possible? I'm still my like track is still on like, is it possible to have a healthy church and a celebrity pastor that is there? And I'm thinking like to myself, like I've been for like the big churches I've been to, like when I've been to like a mega church for a service, I actually had this thought just now. I was like, I have gone to watch movies at a movie theater and talked about the movie more on the way out than I've been to like big churches and talked about the sermon on the way out, because it's the same act. Like we're all going to watch something together and then we're all leaving. Like it's like what we're doing. And like I've talked about movies like a Marvel movie, like in the intricacies of the plot or whatever, like so much more. And even like throughout the theater, into the car on the ride home, still talking about it. You know what I mean? More than I had talked about like the sermons that the person was presenting. And I'm interested to see if we change the title of the megachurch pastor to sort of like megachurch teacher, can they still reside within that church as the teacher and have the church be healthy? Or do you have to divorce the person from the church completely to where they're a member of it now and they have like a teaching ministry separate from that that's not part of the church, so the church can stay healthy so people aren't just coming for them? It just, I don't know. I don't know if in my mind you can have a healthy church and have a celebrity pastor that is currently teaching there. I guess it depends on the theology of what you think church should be.
Yeah, I think so. Even in what you're saying, the comparison to the movie with the sermon, um, for me, and I don't know, maybe I'm an outlier here, and I'm about to out myself. I don't know, but for me, it's like, yes, on the Sunday, I will, we'll talk about the sermon, we'll talk about Sunday school,
Mm-hmm.
but I think of it similar to like whenever I think about my years in youth group,
Mm-hmm.
where I don't, it would be difficult for me to tell you like five specific
Yeah.
messages that I heard in youth group that just completely changed my life. However, I could tell you about the relationships that I had with people
Mm.
and in that community that
Mm.
was super helpful. And
Mhm.
so when we talk about church, I think that's kind of the trap that we fall into. And part of my issue with the huge church dynamic is that we define church simply by the sermon and the worship, and we're
Mm.
completely losing the community aspect of that.
Of course.
And that's not to say that sermons aren't important, and that's not to say that worship isn't important, but I think that I take a lot out of just the community aspect, and even for me, like the Sunday school time where we're spending kind of an hour on whatever we're talking about, as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
20-25 minutes. And this comes from someone who has done preaching, like, so I think that that's important,
Yeah.
but I think the community and the relationship is a huge part of it that I think that we're missing whenever it gets to be massive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot too. Like I remember what I was gonna say also. I was just gonna say I grew up in a very charismatic tradition where I saw a lot of these um like a bad role model of celebrity pastors on a pedestal. And I remember when I first became a Christian, like I remember wanting to have that attention, that level of influence and attention, like mostly because of selfish ambition. It took the Lord a number of years to just really like get me to a place where He could call it out directly and I could repent. But yeah, so it was like probably not until I was in the Philippines and talking to Christians there who had far less than me and had way better attitudes about their life than I did. And I was like, man, I need to do some introspection. But all that to say, with the size of churches, I've been to churches with 2,000 people and 300 person youth groups when I was in like seventh grade, and I've been to churches with 50 people max in the whole congregation, right? And I think there's definitely pros and cons to both, but I think a pro to the smaller churches, and this is what you talked about this earlier with you and your elders were discussing this, like how big the churches get. You get to keep that community feel. Like the church Darren and I go to in Honolulu is like, I don't know, maybe 100 people. And before and after, people are sticking
Yeah.
around, hanging out, having coffee, catching up, and making plans for the week, and the pastor's talking to everybody, and it's a very family feeling community, and we love it.
Dude, I talk to the pastor every week. It's awesome.
And I do. I think that's super, super important. And and to be able to have people around you that, I can't, again, you can't say like, well, if you go to a small church, then that's because there are clearly small churches that aren't great and don't do community well. But to be able to have people around, like ideally you should have people in your church that well, that you're doing life together, that it isn't just we see them on Sunday and see how their week was. So, and it is, I was thinking just even personally, it's a difficult thing. You talked about this, you talked about the zeal for it, and it's been difficult for me because I've recognized that I'm a gifted communicator, and I love, like, one of the things that I love to do is go to schools and camps and retreats and things like that, and to be able to speak. And that's one thing that I've really struggled with, is how, like, I would love to do more of that. How do I do that? Because it feels so unnatural for me to call people up and say, hey, I'm good at this. Why don't you, because I want to stay away from that. Like, I'm, maybe to a fault. Like, I don't want it even to appear that I'm just trying to gain all of this. But at the same time, like, I want to use the gifts that God has given me. And so, trying to figure that out. And so it's interesting even talking about that and talking about some of these guys. It's like, that's one of the things that I worry about, is that, because again, I don't know how these guys started. I don't know if it started the exact same way. And then it's like, oh, I have, 50,000 people that want to come to my church, and now I'm, I'm the man and whatever. So it is, for me, it is keeping people around me, that are going to tell me one way or the other, that, either it's good or, I need to pull back a little bit. So,
yeah. In that note, what I've thought about is pretty interesting is, so we staff a ministry school together in Honolulu, and a couple of our campuses around the world will fly in like really big name speakers, and these speakers to pay some of the speakers that they charge like $10,000 a session to come out or something like that. And when I first heard that, I was like so appalled. Like, what? Like, you would?
We don't pay them that though.
No, we don't. We're a small campus. The bigger campuses, they're like, oh yeah, pennies. No, not really. But the fact that any Christian minister would charge like 5 digits to come and share the gift that God has given them, at first, like, I was like so appalled. I remember looking at one of Derry and I's good friend Dalton. I was like, dude, never let me do that. But then I talked to one of our friends who's a Christian and in business and really smart and wise there, and she goes, well, Ethan, you got to think about this. Like, they need to make a living. How often do they get to travel? And if this is the value of their teaching, then there is a business exchange that's happening that's very legitimate. Like, there was a pastor's teaching conference I was interested in going to that was just on the other island, and I looked at the tickets, and the tickets were like $500, $600 tickets, and I was like, for 2 days to learn how to preach, my guy, I'll go on YouTube. And I was like, what? And so then I talked to that same friend, and she's like, well, like, you got to think about like how much they're worth, how much effort they've put into it, the estate that they're at, and also this is their job, they get paid for it. And so that's, ever since then, I've kind of been like, I still feel uncomfortable with 5 figures for a teaching week, because that's like $1,000 a day for like at 2 hours. They're making like $250 an hour teaching. I'm just like, part of me feels like because the Bible says freely receive, freely give, I almost just want to never charge for anything. But I also understand the aspect that, like, well, maybe these guys have 6 children and like 7 missionaries they could be supporting. I don't know what they're doing with the money, and so I don't want to be cynical and just say, like, stamp it as wrong. But I don't know. So maybe you could speak on that. Does it irk you? How should we think about that? Because that is part of the celebrity Christian status.
Well, I'll tell you, not even, and I'm not even close to a celebrity, but I will tell you that my least favorite question that I get is, how much do you charge?
Mm.
for, and I'm just like, I don't even want to answer that. Like I have no idea. I have no idea how to go about that, because there is part of me that's like, nothing, like, just get me there and I'll do it. And there is part of me that's like, I would, if you gave me enough money to live off of for the rest of my life tomorrow, this is still stuff that I would want to go out and do.
Right.
And so there is part of that, but then there is the practical part of it. So I'll give you a quick example. I had someone, it was cool. I had someone reach out to me from a camp across the country that was like, hey, we love your stuff. We'd love to bring you out to, to do this. And, but that was part of my response to them was, I hate that I have to ask these questions, but here are just some logistical things. Like cause I can't, I can't fly across the country, like, on my, so there are things like that. And then, and also I've had both sides of it where I've been asked to come and do a retreat locally. And I have just said, either we didn't talk about money at all, or I just said, whatever you guys are, think that it's worth and you're able to do. And I've gotten less than what I thought I was going to get. And I've gotten way more than I thought I was going to get. And so again, it's difficult to make a blanket statement, right? It's just like, because there's part of me that goes, well, are we holding Christians that are in just, I hate using the word secular, but if are we holding Christians that are in the secular world to the same standard, that are doing things that God has gifted them to do, that they love to do, but they're making good money off of it?
That's such a good point.
And one of the things, sneakers, preachers and sneakers, I'm sure you guys, I've thought about that a ton, and I've heard a couple things where it was like, a pastor talking about that he got shoes that were gifted to him by someone. They were like, we just want to give, and it's like, well, is it like, what are you supposed to say to that? Like, nope, I don't want them. So, but I do think there is something to, especially again, when you're adding the title of pastor, it's like, it's tough for me, if you're making I would more than that. If you're making like up close to over $1 million a year, like, I think that you can make the argument that that's what your time's worth, but it definitely starts to creep in, like, what else could you be doing with that?
Well, even with that,
but at the same time, like, you can go to really small churches and go, how are you using your money? And so it's not just a mega church thing, it's just a church thing in general, which again just kind of goes to the foundation piece of like, what is it that you're building on? So it's difficult. It's a really, ministry, this is what I've realized in different ministry jobs that I've had, and even being in leadership at our church, is like, and I worked at a Christian school for a while, like, churches are, it's super weird because you have the business side of things and it's a ministry. So where do those things, what gets priority? What, how do those things marry? Because a lot of times they run into each other. And so what is your thought on doing ministry while also having to run a business? And I think that's what you see, even with the Hillsong stuff. It's like, it was, I had someone say to me, they watched the documentary and were like, if you took all of the ministry stuff out of it, you wouldn't see, it was a great business, and so how do you keep the business side from just completely taking over? And that's not a mega church thing. I was in a really small church at one point working as a youth pastor, and it was a business. That's how it was viewed. So so a lot of the mega church and celebrity pastor stuff can absolutely be applied to the smaller churches and smaller congregations.
It's really interesting what you just said about how any other Christian in any other profession you wouldn't have the same standard on, because I've never thought about that. Like, I have a background in welding, and if I had my own business as a welder and I happen to be a Christian and I charge $200 an hour to weld, which you can very well do, no one would think anything about it. They'd be like, oh, that guy is really good at his craft, good for him. And we don't look at teaching as as part of a craft. And I'd wonder if maybe the reason is the type of work that people are in, where one is to benefit the body. And so are you robbing the people of God for them to receive this gift that God wants to reveal to them? And with the welding, it's kind of more of a transactional only, like business type stuff. And and so maybe there's too much thought there, but it looked like Derry had something to say.
Not necessarily. I think that there can be a lot of gatekeeping problems with that and some abuse that can happen, some manipulation. But I think the logic is fairly sound of you should probably pay the person what they're worth, and especially if they've invested a certain amount of money in themselves to get to that place. Like it costs a lot of money to get a PhD. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so like you got to pay off the PhD at some point. And if you're $200,000 in debt, like to get this like degree, like you got to pay it off. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I totally understand that aspect of it. There's just such a possibility for abuse that you can feel very wary of it.
Yeah. Again, it's, and it's tough. There are so many different avenues that you can go down with that, because it's like, let's say that, I do a retreat locally, and I say, a weekend retreat, and I say, what, $200 that, it's close, that's fine. And then someone else asks me to do one locally or a little further away, and they say, well, I know that you charged them this much, so so there is a business part of that where it's like, okay, maybe I need to set a flat rate. And it seems like, again, so much of it comes down to, and this, I may go, maybe this will be a really broad thing and kind of 10,000 foot view thing, but so often with Christianity, we talk about so many things that are outside of ourselves. And I think that this is another thing that comes back to the importance of what am I doing day to day to strengthen my relationship with God. So the focus is not, how many followers am I going to get today? Am I going to be able to book this retreat? Am I going to be able to do this? But I'm starting with my relationship with God. And we did I think it was actually during quarantine and coming out of that, we did a live stream Bible study because we weren't able to do anything else with our congregation. And we were going through Proverbs. And one of the things that we kept coming back to in Proverbs was how much seems to be focused on just the day to day, and so when you're asking God for wisdom, it's not that you're just receiving it in that moment because you need it right then. It's, what are you doing day to day to build that relationship with God, to gain wisdom so that whenever you need it, it's there. And for us as Christians, it's so easy to look at other people and say, well, they shouldn't be doing that, and I wouldn't do it that way. And some of that is valid, and that can be a righteous thing. But even when you're talking about salaries and I wouldn't do it that way and whatever, it's really difficult to to sit here in Western Pennsylvania and say, well, I would never take that much money every year. It's like, who has ever said that? Like, and so
it's good.
So there's definitely a danger in that, but it's the importance of doing what you are called to do, and being faithful in what you're called to do. And so that I've kind of had a renewed focus with that, of just like, because there are things that I would love to be doing right now that just aren't happening. And so it's kind of a waiting period, and that can be really frustrating. But one thing that I go back to, one of my favorite verses is Ephesians 2:10, that talks about being created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God created ahead of time for you to walk in. So it's like, okay, every day there's a focus for me of just doing what God has put in front of me, finding that next good thing. And so as we talk about the broad things and the temptations, and I think we can be praying for people and looking even for whether they are doing that as well. And so again, like there's a righteous way to do that. And I definitely am not in the camp of like, you should never judge what anyone's doing, because I think that the Bible says otherwise, but we can't do that if we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing as well.
Mm-hmm. It's good.
All right, I have one last question. You have anything to talk about, Ethan? I know we're coming to an end here. Cool. Okay, my last scenario, a little disjointed, but I'd love to hear you guys' answers on this. If you had to put yourself in the situation of you have become a celebrity, you're a pastor somewhere, as in like you're not just the teaching pastor, but is your job to pastor and shepherd a church, right? You have become a celebrity overnight. So like in a week, somehow you have 1 million followers now. And these followers are going to start coming to your church. Just you personally, for your congregation, how you think church should be done, all that kind of stuff. Do you separate yourself from that church? Do you not separate yourself from that church? What do you do for yourself in that situation, for the health of your church, but also for what you think the ministry will do like the best with, and how you can reach the most people?
Good question.
It's a hard one, right?
Well, yeah, it is. Because obviously, we would all love to sit here and be like, well, I would do the right thing, so I think for me, it kind of comes back to what I would hope that I would just continue to do what I try to do anyway, which is continue to preach the gospel, and not, one of the things, and I was thinking about this today, because this idea, and you guys mentioned it, like this idea of a celebrity within Christianity is not new. From the beginning of the church, there have been those that were well known. And I taught a youth Sunday school class on church history at one point, which was great because I had not done a lot of study on that. And it felt like every single week. Yeah. It felt like every single week we were talking about someone, and it was like, he taught this and it was great, and he did these great things, and then there was like this downfall of of this person, and a lot of it was seemed to be centered around the feeling of having to continue to provide something new. And I see that continuing to happen, where it is like, we preach the gospel, but then people are clamoring for more, and then guys feel like they have to find something new, and then it's heretical, and so so that's honestly, that's one of my biggest, anytime that I've spoken about things that guys have said from the pulpit, a lot of it comes back to that, where it's like trying to say something new or recognize something new in scripture that no one has ever thought about before. And so my hope would be that I would continue to preach the gospel, and that I would have people around me that were going to hold me accountable to that. But in addition to that, similar to what, when I talked about the community aspect of it, my hope would be that we would be able to build up leaders in the church to be able to continue to shepherd in a way that we're called to. Cool. So that would be my hope, is that, preach the gospel and, try to shepherd well with the team that's around me.
Cool. Well said. Yeah, I think, like you said, we'd all like to think that we do the right thing. We can strategize. And I think it's even good to put yourself in that position of like, okay, if I got that fame, what would I hope I would do? Because then if you condition yourself there enough, you can start to recognize maybe, okay, I'm getting to that point, or it seems like I'm getting more traction than I had before. Maybe I should start putting in place some of the stuff I thought about earlier, rather than never thinking about getting there. And you're like, oh, I have no idea. But before we close out the show completely, one, to the audience listening, Derry and I have to apologize. We've stopped asking our guests this very important question that we had been asking every guest at the end of every show. And I think maybe for a month and a half, we forgot this question.
Oh, it's been longer than that. It's been like 3 months.
Yes, it's been way too long. I was thinking about this last week when I was talking to my wife, and I was like, oh my gosh, I haven't. We haven't asked this at all. This is bad.
I felt bad asking Aish the question, and so I did it, and that's like when I cognitively stopped.
That's hilarious. What, you think because she's a woman she can't take down an animal?
No, but she's from India. I just didn't know if there was.
Oh,
Like,
she was a
some
vegetarian
taboos
too, though.
there.
So
Yeah,
not
that's
because
why
she's a
I
woman,
asked.
because women
I
can
did
take down
want to ask.
animals.
No,
Women,
yeah, it was the vegetarian
yeah,
part.
absolutely.
Yeah, but anyways, that was the question.
John
Yeah.
For
okay,
sure.
so John, you get any melee weapon of your choice from present day, past history, no future, like lightsabers don't count. Realistic melee weapon. You're in an arena. What's the largest real land predatory animal you can take down?
And you can't choose like a chainsaw, like maybe
Man.
non-motor operated.
Okay.
To give you an example, I
We
say
have a lot of examples.
a hyena and a short sword.
I'm gonna be real honest. I like my the the view that I have of myself when it comes to combat is not real high. So man, that's a tough one. Predatory animal. Yeah, I mean, hyena is probably a good. It's probably around that size. I would say.
Granted, I
Initially I
said
thought,
that before I found out they have like the 10th large or strongest bite force. So
well,
Ain't biting you.
immediately I think of like like a dog, like a dog
Yeah.
size, and so then I
exactly.
thought like wolf. Then I thought like wolf, but then I saw a video of like actual people around wolves, and they are massive.
Huge.
Um,
Yeah.
so there's no way that that's happening. Um, I guess the weapon plays into this too.
Yep.
I think maybe I would go like maybe I would go like kind of play some strategy here, and maybe go with something like a wolf that I know is going to jump from a longer distance,
Come on.
to like lunge towards me at a longer distance, and then have something with a little bit of length that I can maybe get a lucky
Smart
stab
man.
on. So, oh, you know what I would? Oh man, what's that called? There's a guy it's in the Old Testament. There's only one verse about it. This is so obscure. This is terrible to bring up on a podcast, but it says that he took down like 600 Philistines with an ox goad. I don't know if you guys know what that is. Yeah, so I would pick that just because it looks
Sounds like
awesome.
Judges.
Yeah, I think it probably is. And I would go. So I would go with an ox goad, and I would strategically pick something that's going to lunge from farther out. So maybe like a wolf, and just pray that I get a lucky swing in. Because I really don't like my chances no matter what it is. But
Yeah.
I hopefully get a lucky swing. That's an excellent question, by the way. Because there are a lot of there are a lot of different options with that. But yeah, I'd go with the wolf and try to get a lucky swing with something. And
we had someone say a
happens.
crocodile or an alligator and a spear, and they're like, I'm just gonna run around it and stab it from the back.
Yeah, I think people underestimate how quickly those things can move.
That's what I think. They go back and forth pretty quickly in defense.
Yeah. I'll tell you, this will be just a good humorous thing to end on, but like legitimately one of my biggest fears is any animal in mass. Like like we had a flock of like, I think like crows land in our backyard one time, and it was a nightmare. I just like it just, I don't know what it is, but yeah. So when you said that initially, because there are also those questions of like, do you think you could take down, this animal, or how many of this animal could you take down if you had a baseball bat or whatever? And I'm always like, none. I would freeze up and it wouldn't happen. So those are fun. Those are fun questions for sure.
Cool.
We could also start asking, how many fifth graders do you think you could take down at one time in an arena?
Question too.
Yeah, that's a good. I've heard that one. I think what I've heard is like it's like fifth graders, but they're all wearing like football helmets or something.
Oh, geez, that makes it way harder.
Yeah,
granted, they're fifth graders.
I think what I heard was it's like fifth graders. They have helmets, but I think you have like a baseball bat or something. Like how many could we take down? which again, like
That's hilarious.
it's a thinker. I don't know. That
At
would
least
be
they
difficult.
can't bite you if they have the helmets on.
Yeah,
That's what I'm worried
yeah.
about.
I think I think it
How
would
many
be.
are coming to me at one time? Is it? Can I do like
Well,
the 300 thing where I get them narrow and I just?
Well, I think that's the thing with fifth graders is I think your intimidation would be a big part of that because like if you can get them to only, you know, they may not be smart enough to understand that if they swarm, it's fine. But you know, if you scare them enough at the beginning, then you might be able to pick off one at a time.
Yeah.
I don't know.
The great metaphor from A Bug's Life.
Something I'll never know. And that's the other fun part is like, I don't know. I could tell you whatever I want right now. That's never going to happen.
Well, we actually just ordered a wolf and the spear. So we'll just send that.
Yeah, it would be a great that would be a great thing for a simulator, like a simulation. Because I'm sure people would be surprised with how bad that they would do. But that's why those questions are fun.
Yeah. Yep. Right on, everybody. Well, thanks for listening. You can find us on Spotify, iTunes, a number of other places wherever you find audio podcasts, YouTube. We have a Patreon if you would like to support us. We're also on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook, but we never post on Facebook, so don't go there. See you guys next week and have a good week. Bye.
Wait, plug John too. John has a TikTok.
Oh, sorry, you're right. Oh, you're right. I knew there was something I'm forgetting. Check out John. It's John the Messenger, correct? On TikTok and Instagram?
Yeah, John the Messenger on TikTok. And then there's a link to my Instagram on there too.
Cool.
So, yeah. So that's great, guys. I appreciate it. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun too.
Likewise. It was great. All right. So now you can have a good week and see us later. See you guys.